The sun never reached this part of the city. Thick clouds of smoke, metal dust, and burnt oil always hung in the air. The marketplace was loud, crowded, and filled with shadows where lives were sold like old shoes. Slavers shouted, buyers laughed, and the ground was stained with oil and tears. A bell rang twice, sharp and cold. The crowd turned, some smiling, others just curious from behind a broken steel gate. Two guards pulled a young alien girl forward. She stumbled, barely able to walk, her feet chained, her clothes torn. Her skin, a soft pale blue, was covered in dirt and bruises. Her silver-white hair hung like a curtain over her face, hiding her eyes. Next up, worthless meat. The auctioneer shouted, banging his staff on the metal floor. She's mute, skinny, and dumb. No use in bed or battle, he laughed. But hey, her bones are still good for stew. The crowd roared with cruel laughter. The girl said nothing. She didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't fight. Her eyes were empty like she had died long ago. Someone in the crowd threw a rotten piece of fruit. It hit her shoulder and slid down her arm. She didn't even flinch. Come on. Someone bid. The auctioneer barked, I'll take anything. Even just 2 bottles of liquor and a shopping cart. Laughter exploded again. No one raised a hand, not even the scum who bought body parts. In the back of the crowd stood a man, tall, tired, dressed in a dusty old coat and gloves that had seen too many winters. A human. His name was Jace. And he didn't speak much. He just watched. Eyes fixed on the girl like he was studying something broken and precious. Then he stepped forward. Slowly, the auctioneer paused, raising an eyebrow. Jace reached into his bag and pulled out 2 dusty bottles of cheap alien liquor. Then he wheeled out an old, dented shopping cart with a broken wheel. A silence fell over the crowd. Someone coughed, then laughed. You serious, human? The auctioneer smirked. Jace nodded. Once, firm and calm. You're really offering that garbage? Yes, Jace said quietly. The auctioneer shrugged. Sold. For 2 bottles and a junk cart. Ha! More laughter, louder this time. Someone called out, Hey human, want a bucket of rust too? But Jace didn't respond. He walked up the platform. Calm like the storm before thunder, he reached for the girl. And her shackles clanked as she looked up. For the first time, she blinked, slowly, confused. Like her brain couldn't understand what was happening, Jace didn't touch her. He knelt and held out his hand, open and steady. She stared at it for a long time. Then, like a ghost waking up, she took it. The guards unchained her. Handed over the metal collar key. She's all yours. Human, the auctioneer laughed. No returns. Jace didn't say a word. He turned and walked away, the girl stumbling beside him. People whispered and watched. Some laughed, some just stared. The girl looked back once, then forward again. Her steps were slow, painful, unsure, but something was changing. Deep inside, her like a spark under ashes. They walked down the narrow street between junk piles and broken machines, and just before turning the corner, the girl finally spoke, barely a whisper. Why? Jace stopped, looked at her with quiet eyes. Because someone had to, he replied. And then, without another word, they disappeared into the smoke behind them. The laughter of the crowd slowly faded, but in that silence, something powerful had already begun. A girl once sold for 2 bottles and a broken cart had just taken the first step toward something no one expected. And the man who bought her, he wasn't just some poor junk trader. No, he was something much more dangerous than the crowd could ever guess. He was a human with a reason and a heart still burning under the scars. The road they walked was not really a road. It was a narrow path between piles of garbage, rusted ship parts, broken crates, and cracked glass. The air smelled of smoke, grease, and something rotting. Metal walls towered on both sides, covered in graffiti, dried blood, and broken lights. Jace said nothing as he walked. The girl followed, limping, her hands still trembling from the chains. Every few steps, she looked over her shoulder, like someone might grab her again, but no one did. The slavers had laughed and forgotten her. She kept expecting Jace to yell, to pull her, to shove her, but he didn't. He just walked ahead, quiet, calm, his long coat flapping behind him. At one point, she slowed, unsure if she should run. But something inside her whispered, "Don't." So she kept walking, at the edge of the district. They reached a small metal shack, half covered by a collapsed roof. Beside it sat a junky old ship's hull scratched, its engines half buried in trash. Jace opened the side door of the shack and held it for her. She paused, staring at him. He didn't look at her like a buyer looks at property. He just waited. After a moment, she stepped inside. It was warm. A small heater buzzed in the corner. There was a soft mat on the floor, a broken chair, some shelves with food packs, and a sink that leaked but still ran water. Jace took off his coat and hung it by the door. He grabbed a clean blanket from a shelf and handed it to her. She didn't move. Her eyes were full of fear. She had been sold too many times, and she knew what usually came next. "I'm not going to hurt you," Jace said quietly. "You can rest here." Still, she stood frozen. So he placed the blanket on the mat and stepped back. "Sit if you want," he said. "Eat if you want." He went to the shelf, opened a pack of warm soup, and placed it near her. The smell made her stomach twist. She hadn't eaten real food in days. But her hands shook too much to reach for it. Jace sat on the floor across the room, pulled out a small tool, and started fixing a cracked circuit board. He didn't look at her, didn't speak again. Just worked, slowly and quietly. She waited, unsure, after many minutes. She crawled toward the soup. Her fingers grabbed the cup. Spilling a little, she drank fast, as if someone might take it away. She burned her tongue, but didn't stop. Then she wrapped the blanket around herself and sat in the corner, her eyes never leaving Jace later that night. While he worked outside on the ship, she crept toward the door. It was slightly open. Her heart pounded. This was her chance to run. She could disappear, just like before. No collar, no slavers, no chains. She stepped into the night, cold wind hitting her face. She walked fast, then slow, then stopped. She looked back. No one was following her. No alarm, no yelling. Jace hadn't even noticed. She walked a little farther, but her legs started shaking again. Not from fear this time, from something else. Where would she go? What would she eat? The streets weren't safe. Not for someone like her. Not alone. Not again. She sat under a broken streetlight and cried. The first real tears in years, not from pain, not from beatings, but from the weight of something she didn't understand. Kindness, freedom, confusion. When the sun rose, she was back at the shack. The door was still open. Jace was asleep in the chair, tools in his lap. He didn't ask where she went. He just stood, stretched, and said, "There's more soup if you're hungry." She stared at him, her voice barely a whisper. "Why didn't you stop me?" He shrugged. "You're not a prisoner. You're not property. You're free to go whenever you want." She sat down on the mat, her hands slowly warming around the soup cup. For the first time, her body relaxed, not fully, but enough to feel something she hadn't felt in years. Safe. He watched her quietly, then said, "You got a name?" She shook her head. "Don't remember." She shook it again. "All right," he said, thinking, "Then I'll call you Nova until you choose your real name, Nova." She repeated softly, "It's the last light a star gives before it dies. But sometimes, it's also the first light of something new." Her lips moved slightly. Almost like a smile, she didn't understand everything yet. But something inside her told her this. Her life had just changed, and maybe, just maybe, being sold for 2 bottles and a cart wasn't the end, it was the beginning. Nova sat cross-legged on the floor, her fingers curled tightly around a warm mug. The steam from the drink fogged her view. But she didn't care, for the first time in years. Her body wasn't shivering. Her stomach wasn't empty. Her back wasn't bleeding. Jace moved around the small shack, checking panels, cleaning tools. Sorting scraps, he didn't ask questions. Didn't stare, didn't pressure her. He just let her be. And that confused her more than anything. "Nova," he said one morning, tapping a broken box. "You ever use one of these?" She looked at the box, then at him. It was a power stabilizer. Simple but old, she nodded slowly. "Once? Good." Jay smiled. "Help me fix it, yeah?" That was how it started. One tool, one part. One tiny task at a time, Nova began helping. At first, she fumbled. Her hands still unsure, but after a few days, her movements got smoother, her eyes sharper. She knew machines. Her mind remembered, even if her past didn't. Jace watched her closely, not with suspicion, but with interest. This girl had been labeled worthless, broken, dumb, but in her hands, dead parts came to life again. He didn't tell her, but he started saving the more difficult repairs for her. And each time she fixed something, her face lit up, not with a smile, but with purpose, a flicker of pride, a hint of identity. One night, Jace came in carrying a sealed box, dusty and marked with an old military logo. He set it down with a thud and sighed. Nova glanced at it, then turned back to the circuit board she was working on. But something in her told her this box was important. "Want to know who I was before this?" Jace asked quietly. Nova hesitated, then nodded. He opened the box, slowly, like it was filled with ghosts. Inside were photos, medals, a folded flag, and an old ID badge. The badge showed a younger Jace, clean-shaven, in a sharp uniform. Commander Jace Arden. It read, Galactic Forces, Recon Unit. Code, Crimson Sun. Nova blinked. She looked at the man in the picture, then at the tired human in front of her. "You were a soldier." She whispered. "Not anymore," he said. "War changes people, makes some heroes, breaks others." She looked back at the tools in her hand. "You're not broken," she said softly. He chuckled, surprised. "Neither are you," he replied. The room fell quiet again, but something unspoken passed between them, a bond deeper than food and shelter. They were 2 broken stars learning how to shine again. That night, she sat alone in the shack. Staring at the badge, she looked at her own hands, rough with grease and cuts. Her reflection in the cracked mirror didn't scare her as much anymore. "Nova," she whispered to herself. The name felt strange, but it fit. She still didn't know her real name. But Jace's name gave her something more important to place. She was not a product, not property, not forgotten. The next morning, she wore a small metal chain around her neck. It had a tiny bolt on it, a joke from Jace, he had said. "Every engineer needs a lucky bolt," she had laughed. Just a little, and kept it. Later that day, she was cleaning under one of the shelves when she found something odd. A long, thin case buried in dust. Curious, she pulled it out and opened it. Inside was a narrow blade, shining even in the shadows. The handle was engraved with alien runes. But she recognized them. Her heart skipped. They were from her home planet Caltheris. Memories hit her like a wave. A room filled with books, a garden with silver trees. Her mother's hand in hers. She dropped the case, gasping. Jace rushed in. "Nova? What is it?" She pointed at the blade, her fingers shaking. I know this," she said. "These symbols. They mean first starborn. It's..." She paused, her voice cracking. "My name?" Jace looked at her carefully. "Your real name?" She nodded slowly. "Thari," she whispered. "My name was Thari." Jace knelt beside her. "That's a strong name," he said. She nodded again, wiping tears from her eyes. "But," she added, I still like Nova." Jace smiled. "Then you're both." Thari and Nova. Old star and new light from that day. Something in her changed. She still wore the name Nova like armor. But now it had meaning. Now she wasn't just surviving. She was rebuilding. And Jace. He didn't just save a life. He helped a forgotten girl remember who she was. Days passed quietly. Nova Thari began walking straighter. She no longer looked over her shoulder at every sound. Her hands, once weak and trembling, now moved with purpose, fixing damaged wires, polishing old tools, making the small shack feel like a home. Jace watched her grow. He didn't say much, but she saw it in his eyes. Pride. She was no longer just surviving. She was learning, building, becoming something new. But peace never lasts long in places built from shadows. It started one evening just after sunset. The sky was dark with smog, the streets unusually quiet. Jace was working outside under the ship's wing. Welding a cracked panel, Nova was inside, humming softly to herself, organizing spare parts. Then a knock. Not a polite one. A heavy metal bang that echoed like thunder against the thin door. Nova froze. Jace stopped welding. His hands still, he walked slowly to the door. Picked up the small handheld scanner. The screen blinked 3 lifeforms. All armed, all hostile. Jace didn't open the door. He spoke calmly. "Who is it?" A deep voice answered, rough and smug. "Delivery." The man laughed. "Return order on a certain blue-skinned girl you've been hiding." Nova's breath caught in her throat. She stepped back, shaking. The voice continued. "You've got something that doesn't belong to you, human. She's marked property of the Red Chain, and we've come to collect." Jace's eyes turned hard. He pressed a button beside the door, locking the entry bolts tight. "She's not property," he said. "She's a person and she's free now." Laughter erupted outside. "Oh, that's cute," the voice said. "But rules are rules. Jace Arden, you touch our product. You pay in blood." Jace walked over to Nova, who was now backed against the wall. Her eyes wide with fear. "Nova, listen to me," he said firmly. "You're safe here. You hear me?" She nodded, but her lips trembled. "They found me," she whispered. "They tracked me somehow." Jace cursed under his breath. "They must have planted a tracker in your collar before I bought you." He reached under the workbench and pulled out a small scanner. "Hold still," he said. He waved the device across her neck and chest, a sharp beep. There it was, deep inside the back of her collarbone. A tiny chip, hidden under skin and scar tissue. "I can get it out," Jace said, "but it'll hurt." "I don't care," she said, without blinking. He nodded, grabbed a medkit, and opened a drawer with a surgical tool. "Bite down on this," he said, handing her a thick cloth. Minutes later, it was done. Nova didn't scream. She barely moved. She held the tracker in her hand like a cursed tooth, then crushed it under her heel, outside. The thugs were growing impatient. Last warning. The voice yelled, "Send her out, or we torch your whole junk pile to the ground." Jace didn't answer. He looked at Nova, then at the old control panel behind the wall. "Time to show them we're not helpless," he muttered. He hit a red switch defense mode. Old scrap drones came to life outside. Rotating rusted arms armed with shock blasters and flame repellents. The first thug stepped too close. A jolt of lightning hit him straight in the chest. He screamed and collapsed. The other 2 opened fire. But their shots bounced off Jace's hidden shield walls. He had prepared for this day, even if he hoped it would never come. Nova stood behind him, breathing fast, but something inside her shifted. She wasn't the scared girl from the cage anymore. Not just a victim or a rescued stray. She was someone with fight. "I want to help," she said suddenly. "You already have," Jace replied with a grin. "But I mean it," she said, stepping forward, "if they come in." "I'm not hiding." Jace opened a small drawer. Revealing an old pulse pistol, he looked at her. "You ever used one of these?" She shook her head. "I can teach you," he said. Handing it to her, outside, the last two thugs threw grenades toward the wall. The blast shook the shack, but didn't break the defenses. Jace narrowed his eyes. "If they won't leave," he muttered, "we'll make them." He opened the top hatch of the shack, crawled onto the roof with Nova behind him. From there, they could see the two attackers, crouching near barrels. Reloading, Jace aimed first, fired one down. The other turned in shock, but Nova was faster. Her hands shook, but she pulled the trigger. The shot missed. The thug turned his blaster toward her, but before he could fire, Jace hit him with a second pulse shot. He dropped instantly. Smoke cleared. Sirens echoed in the distance. The fight was over, for now. Nova looked at her hands, still holding the pistol. She wasn't proud of the kill, but she felt something new. Power. Jace put a hand on her shoulder. "You didn't run," he said. "You stood." Nova nodded. "I'm tired of running," she whispered. "They came for the girl I was, but I'm not her anymore." Jace smiled. "Good," he said, "because I think the galaxy's about to meet the real you." The shack was quiet again, but it wasn't peaceful. Smoke still hung in the air. Broken parts littered the ground, and scorch marks painted the walls. Nova sat on a stool, her hands still holding the warm pulse pistol. Her knuckles white. Jace was patching a burn on his shoulder, gritting his teeth. "They'll send more," he said, voice low. Nova didn't ask how he knew. She just nodded. The red chain never stopped. Not until they got back what they believed was theirs. Even if it was a living soul. Jace stood up, grabbed a dusty crate from under the floor, and dropped it on the table. He opened it with a click, revealing a set of old starship keys. Nova looked at him, confused. "I thought your ship was just junk," she said. He smirked. "That one outside? It's just 4 parts. Follow me." He led her to the back wall, where old fuel barrels and scrap metal were stacked. He moved a panel, entered a code, and the floor shifted. A section of ground slid open, revealing a narrow ramp. Nova stepped back, stunned. Beneath the junkyard was a hidden hangar, and inside it, a fully functional Star-class scout ship. Its hull was scratched but clean, painted dark blue with silver wings. It looked like a bird ready to take flight after a long rest. "You kept this hidden all this time?" she asked, eyes wide. "Only for emergencies," he said. "I guess this counts." They walked down the ramp, the lights of the hangar flickering to life as they approached. Jace ran his fingers along the hull, almost like greeting an old friend. "I named her Solace years ago," he said softly. "She saved me once, and now? Maybe she'll save you too." Nova touched the metal, feeling warmth through her fingertips for the first time since she was a child. The idea of escape didn't feel like a dream, it felt real. Inside the ship, everything smelled of age and fuel. Dust floated in beams of dim light, and the hum of sleeping power systems echoed around them. Jace moved like he remembered every wire. Every switch. He turned on auxiliary power, and the ship hummed to life. "She needs a full charge." "But she'll fly," he said. "We'll take the long route through the dead sectors. Avoid patrols, hide behind the belt." He looked at Nova. "If we make it past the Zareth checkpoint, there's a system that owes me a favor, out there. You can be free." Nova stood in silence, looking out the side window where stars barely flickered beyond layers of smoke. "I don't want to go alone," she said quietly. Jace blinked. "I thought that's what you wanted." "I did," she said. "Before, but now." I don't want to leave the one person who treated me like a person. Jace didn't respond for a long moment. Then he smiled faintly. Then we go together. They spent the next hours preparing. Nova checked the ship's systems, fixing small faults, calibrating sensors, organizing supplies. Jace loaded the last of his tools, grabbed weapons, medicine, and fuel packs. While cleaning a drawer, Nova found a faded picture. It showed a younger Jace, smiling beside a woman with dark eyes and curly hair. Between them stood a small girl about Nova's age when she was taken. Nova looked at the picture, then at Jace. "Your family?" she asked. Jace nodded, his voice low. "They're gone." Nova didn't ask how. The silence said enough. That night, they sat on the ramp outside the ship, watching smoke drift like ghosts through the junkyard. Jace handed Nova a small pouch. Inside was a necklace made from bent copper and a single stone. "It was my daughter's," he said. "She made it before." Before things changed, Nova looked at him, unsure. "You want me to keep this?" "She would have liked you," Jace said, smiling sadly. She was strong too. Nova slipped the necklace over her head. "I'll protect it," she promised. "No," Jace said. "It'll protect you." Suddenly, a warning beep echoed from the ship. Jace rushed inside, looked at the screen. "They found the broken tracker," he muttered. "They're coming again, this time with more. How long do we have?" "Maybe 3 hours," he said. Nova's eyes sharpened. "Then we leave now." The ship's engines coughed to life. Warming slowly, lights blinked green across the board. Jace sat in the pilot's seat, Nova beside him, gripping the co-pilot controls. "You've ever flown before?" he asked. "No," she said, "but I'm a fast learner." He chuckled. "All right then, co-pilot Nova, let's get the stars back." As the ship rose through the secret hatch, leaving the junk behind, Nova looked down one last time. The place where she was once dragged like trash was now below her feet. And ahead the sky, the ship's solace drifted through space like a ghost. Engines quiet, lights dimmed, hiding in shadows between asteroid belts. Nova sat at the co-pilot's seat, eyes wide, watching the stars blink past. This was her first time seeing the galaxy from the sky, and yet, it felt familiar. Jace was focused on navigation, hands moving over the controls like a musician. "We're low on fuel," he said. "There's an old refueling station nearby abandoned, but might still work." Nova nodded, her hands resting on the small copper necklace he gave her. "I'll help," she said softly. He smiled. "I know." They landed quietly, the station floating near a dead moon. It was falling apart, trusted arms, flickering lights, broken docks, but it still had power. Jace stepped out first, scanning the area. Weapon ready, Nova followed, wearing a thick jacket, pistol strapped to her leg inside the station. It smelled like mold and dust. Old machines beeped weakly, walls creaked, and metal groaned under their steps. Jace found a working terminal and started the fuel sequence. Nova explored the side room, where empty crates and broken food packs were scattered. Then she heard something, a soft beep. Then a flicker of red light, her breath caught. She looked up, a tracker drone. High in the corner, blinking silently, she ran back. "Jace, we've been spotted." He froze. "They're here?" "Not yet," she said. "But that drone, someone's watching." Jace's hands moved faster. "Overriding the fuel locks, we need at least 5 minutes," he muttered. Nova drew her pistol and stood near the doorway, heart pounding. 5 minutes became 4. Then 3. Then they came. A loud crash shook the hallway. Armed fighters in black armor stormed in, their helmets marked with red chain symbols. Nova fired the first shot, her hand steady. It hit one in the shoulder, knocking him back. "Run!" Jace shouted, but Nova didn't run. She ducked, rolled behind cover, and fired again. Boom, another hit. she was no longer the girl in chains. She was the fire that had been hidden inside all along. Jace pulled her back, both of them retreating down the hallway. Blasts echoed. Sparks flew from walls. The whole station groaned under the weight of battle. They made it to the fuel control room and slammed the door shut. Jace turned to her, breathing hard. "You're not just brave," he said. "You're dangerous?" Nova laughed weakly. "Guess I learned from the best." The lights flickered, then died. Power outage, total darkness, footsteps echoed outside the door. Slow, heavy, then a voice deep, cold, familiar. "Open the door." "Jace, you know who I am. I gave you a warning before, now I'm here to collect." Jace's face turned pale. Nova whispered, "Who is it?" He answered quietly, "His name is Varric, ex-mercenary. Turned slaver king, he runs the Red Chain." Nova's hand clenched her pistol. "I'm not going back," she said, voice shaking with fire. "I'd rather die." "You won't," Jace promised. "Not today." Suddenly, a small screen on Jace's arm beeped fuel, 80%. He smiled. "We're almost there," he said. Then he reached into his pack and pulled out a strange device, a flash bomb. "Close your eyes when I say," he whispered. Nova nodded. Varric kicked the door open. Blaster ready, but Jace moved fast. Now? The flash bomb exploded, a blast of white light and sound. Varric screamed, covering his eyes. Nova fired twice. One shot hit his leg. The other grazed his shoulder. Jace grabbed her hand, and they ran. The hallway was chaos smoke. Sparks, confused enemies, firing blindly. They dodged through crates, past burning wires. Until they reached the docking bay, the ship was almost full. Its lights now glowing strong. They jumped inside. Jace hit the launch command. Solace rose, engines roaring outside. Slavers fired desperately, but it was too late. The ship blasted into the sky, free again. Nova dropped to her knees. Shaking, Jace sat beside her, putting a hand on her shoulder. "You saved us," he said. She nodded slowly. "But I was scared. Everyone is," he replied. "But you fought anyway. That's what makes you strong." They watched the stars return outside the window. Behind them, the station burned. A fireball in the void, and ahead freedom. Still waiting, still calling. Nova looked down at her necklace. Then at her hands. They were no longer shaking. "I'm not running anymore," she said. "I'm not hiding," Jace nodded. "No," he said. "You're rising." The stars stretched wide across the dark sky. Nova stood by the window of solace. Watching them drift past like glowing dust, each one looked like a promise. A place where she might never be hunted again. Jace sat in the pilot's chair. Quiet, focused, but smiling more often now. They had made it through the belt, past the danger zones, past the pain. Ahead of them lay System Alaris, a peaceful sector. Once a rebel's safe haven during the Old War. Jace had contacts. They're real people, not dealers or scavengers. People who would give Nova a chance to live. Not just survive. "You sure you want to land here?" Jace asked softly. Nova turned from the window. "You trust them?" "With my life," he replied. She nodded. "Then I'll try." They broke through Alaris orbit during dawn. The planet below was warm in color, golden oceans and forests that shimmered in the light. As Solace descended, Nova's heart beat faster. Her hands clenched, then relaxed. She didn't know why she felt afraid, maybe because this time no one was chasing her. The landing pad was clean, guarded by tall towers and sleek drones. Not the rusty scrap worlds she knew. Jace opened the hatch, and warm air filled the ship. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Nova stepped forward, one step, then another, until her feet touched real ground. Waiting for them was a woman with short white hair and sharp eyes. She wore a blue jacket with an old rebel patch on the sleeve. "Commander Arden," she said with a grin. "You look worse than ever." Jace laughed. "Good to see you too, Reka." Reka looked at Nova, curious, not judging, and this. "This is Nova," Jace said proudly. "She's not cargo. Not a rescue case, she's someone I believe in." Rika extended her hand. Nova hesitated, then shook it. Her grip was firm. "You've got strong eyes," Rika said. "I've seen that look before in survivors who became leaders." Nova didn't speak. She just nodded, but deep inside, something rose. Not the desperate kind, but the gentle kind. Like sunlight after endless storm. They were led to a settlement built into the cliffs. Clean streets, solar towers. Quiet homes carved into stone. Children played in the sand. Running past aliens of all shapes, no one wore chains. No one was afraid. Nova stood still, watching a little girl with green skin chase a glowing ball. She whispered, "This can't be real." Jace stepped beside her. "It is," he said. "It took years. But they built this for people like you." Rika gave Nova a small bracelet that shimmered when placed on her wrist. "This gives you identity, safety, and protection," she said. "Anyone scans you now, they'll see a citizen, not a slave." Nova stared at the bracelet, blinking back tears. She whispered, "No collar, no number, no price." Rika smiled, only value over the next days. Nova met with engineers, teachers, and healers. They tested her skills mechanics, design, wiring, systems. And she passed everything with quiet focus. They were amazed. "Where did you learn this?" One asked. She looked at Jace, then said, "Pain taught me. But kindness helped me remember." Jace spent time helping other refugees, fixing power grids, guiding supply ships. But he always checked in on Nova, and every day she stood taller, spoke louder. One evening, she handed him a new tool. Handmade, engraved with stars. "For you," she said, "you gave me a name. Now I give you thanks." He took it slowly. Holding back emotion, "I didn't save you," he said. "You saved yourself on the 7th day." A crowd gathered at the cliff. Rika stood with Nova and announced, "This girl came here broken, hunted, lost. But today, she becomes one of us." Nova stepped forward. Looking at everyone, her voice didn't shake. "I was sold for 2 bottles and a shopping cart," she said. "People called me worthless, but one human didn't. He gave me food, a name, a ship, and hope." The wind blew softly. Children listened in silence. Nova raised her wrist, showing the bracelet. "This proves I belong here. But this," she said, pointing to her chest, "proves I deserve to stay." The crowd clapped. Jace clapped the loudest, and for the first time in her life. Nova smiled, not out of shock or fear, but because she truly felt alive that night. She stood alone under the stars. The copper necklace around her neck glowed gently in moonlight. Jace stepped beside her. "What now?" he asked. She looked up. "I build," she said. "Not just machines, but lives. And if anyone like me ever shows up here, I'll be the one waiting at the gates." He nodded. "You've come a long way." "Nova," she looked at him. "No," she whispered. "I've only just begun," and above them, a star blinked bright, defiant, and new, just like her.